Silk Stockings and Social Ladders, a case study. To hopefully give you more inspiration and some ideas of how you can make an interactive installation of your own, I'd also like to share with you a commission I did for the National Trust. Silk Stockings and Social Ladders was an oversized board game designed and fabricated by Katie Hood and myself. It used the mechanics of the classic board game Snakes and Ladders, but was redesigned by us to educate players on the lifestyle of women in the Georgian era. Hence, the snakes became stockings and the ladders became social ladders. The exhibition, being curated by the National Trust, was called The Women of Ray Castle, Conventions and Control. It wasn't just celebrating the heritage and story of the property, but also taking a look at women's suffrage in the historical context of that specific place. The brief set by the National Trust was for an interactive piece. So, by making an oversized board game where the audience became the counters on the board, it ensured they were immersed in the game and taken out of the normal way of experiencing a historical property. Also, by having the piece be a board game, it is immediately recognisable to audiences as a platform for play. And then within that space, we could add information so you come away from the game having had fun and learning something new. This notion ties in with the research I mentioned earlier, using play as a fun and enjoyable way of communicating. In this scenario, we got to share feminist education about women's lives by positioning everyone that played the game to suffer the circumstances of women from that era. For the content of the game, the National Trust team supplied us with some Georgian facts that linked in with the specific property, Ray Castle. And we also added some further facts and phrases from our own research on the period. In terms of getting started with our research, we used the property's history as a springboard for ideas. We looked into Ray Castle, its connections with the gin trade, Georgian and Victorian era fashions, Victorian board games and illustrations, social rules and etiquette. We also looked at our target audience. It was primarily for adults, but it needed to be family friendly. Materials to use. It had to be made of durable flooring material for 1,000+ daily visitors to walk on and interact with, and the dice needed to be made of foam. Once Katie and I had collated our research and ideas into our mood board, we settled on some design choices. The National Trust has thousands of visitors come through on a daily basis. Therefore, the installation has to be robust. To ensure this, the board would need to be printed onto a durable rubber mat. The design of the board game would therefore be done digitally. We chose a muted blue colour scheme with vibrant orange details to refer back to links with the gin trade and their use of copper distilleries. This selective colour palette made the piece more sophisticated in order to appeal to our primary audience of adults. Illustrations on the board game would reference elements of women's lives in the Georgian era. For example, cross-stitch, perfume, shoes, stockings, and they would be done as a simple line drawing with small details and in the same colour palette. To test the functionality of the board game, we drew out test squares to the final scale and also printed our early designs on paper. This helped us check legibility of the font and font sizes, and we were able to test it with some colleagues in the studio to see if they found it comfortable to read too. Some squares had a lot of writing on, meaning the font size couldn't always be the same, so it was important we check this before sending it to print. Once the whole board was designed, we printed it out to a standard board game size and played it through with some friends. This was a great way to test its playability and see how long gameplay would be if a group wanted to play the whole game through, and also gave us a few more people to proofread it with us. We then made final edits and got a test print from the printers to check colour and the finish of the board. Once we signed off on the test, we had the final board game, which was 3 meters by 5 meters, shipped directly to the Lake District for us to install on site. We also painted a giant board on the wall of the rules for players to refer to, and fabricated 2 large dice in foam and durable fabric. The dice being placed on the board, ready for the audience to use, also acted like an invitation to play and step onto the board. The piece was really successful. We had some great feedback from the team at Ray Castle, saying both adults and children enjoyed the game.